Captain's Log, January 19th, 2016. Today I want to talk a little bit about Stan Lee. Yesterday I read a couple of articles where he did interviews talking about a couple of very different things. One really kind of fun and fan theorizing, really interesting, and speculating about what kinds of insane crossovers could potentially be put together just because the general public demands it. Stan Lee saying that a Star Wars Avengers crossover is possible and maybe even likely because in his opinion, if the public demands it enough, if people want it enough, Hollywood will find a way to make it happen. And he also thinks that, by the way, that all of his other major characters that are currently owned by different companies for film will eventually all come together, no matter how expensive it is, because it's something people want really badly. And I was going to say that sort of happened with Spider-Man, although that was a really complicated kind of business situation and had much more to do with Sony being trepidatious about whether or not they could continue with the franchise they had than it did with fans demanding it. But we already almost got some kind of a crossover with Sony's Spider-Man even before that deal happened, and I think that did have a lot to do with basic supply and demand. So anyway, you've got so he talked about that, and that's really interesting. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the thing I want to talk about first is really kind of sad and super depressing, and that is the fact that Stan Lee apparently can no longer read comic books. This was used as kind of a, I don't want to say clickbait, but one of those big kind of shocking sort of article titles. Stan Lee can no longer read comic books. And that's true, but he elaborated, and it was more than just that. Stan Lee can't read now. His eyesight is so bad, and he said, the print's too small in comics, but he said he can't read novels anymore either, and he said that he still comes up with ideas for things like he always has, and will dictate to someone and they'll type it out. And he said, I just have to hope that the outlines are good because I can't read them, and I don't know. And I don't know, that's really sad. Stan Lee in that article said something that I've never heard him say before, and that is, it's awful to feel like you're 1,000 years old. And one of the things that I've always really respected about Stan Lee is that one of the things I've always admired about him is that he has never talked a whole lot about his age, and he's never allowed himself to think too much about getting old and that kind of thing. And I've always thought that he and his wife have kind of kept each other going because they have just this really positive attitude about aging, and he's starting to really be forced to deal with his mortality and the fact that he is as old as he is, and that he's starting to push 100, and there's all kinds of things that he used to be able to do that he can't do anymore, and it sounds like it's starting to get to him a little bit, which is really unfortunate, but it's it's bound to happen. He's obviously not been in the greatest health lately. Still remarkable for his age, I think. But I've heard from people that have seen him at cons and people that have worked around him at cons that he has an insane work ethic and energy when he's signing for fans. He's just furious. Will sign for hours, and then as soon as he's done, I've been told that he goes behind his booth and immediately falls asleep and takes a nap. That there's this kind of insane energy that comes from somewhere that he's able to summon and use for the duration that he needs to, and then he kind of, this sounds awful, but he kind of turns into an old man right after that, and he's a human being just like anybody else, and he puts on a really good face of I can do anything, and I have all all the strength in the world to keep going, even at my age. But I can see a huge difference in him between what he looked like when he was on camera a lot back in the 2007, 2008, when he was doing Who Wants to Be a Superhero, and now there's just like the last decade or so has really made a big difference and really kind of taken a toll. But I still admire him, of course, for plugging along and continuing to plow through and not really ever quite retiring. He's really impressive, but I think it's super sad that he can't really look at comics anymore. Putting those words together and just thinking the father of Marvel Comics, and I realize that he's not the only person to get credit for all of that, but Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, but the guy that created all these characters, he can no longer read comic books. That's really sad. I guess he's still able to see well enough that he's kind of able to enjoy the movies and stuff. But wow, I don't know. But anyway, so there's that, and I find myself, and this is kind of morbid, but I find myself kind of expecting with him, because I just don't think he's ever really talked like that, or if he has, I haven't really seen it before, that he's really kind of letting it get to him, and I find myself wondering if he might not be with us here in the next couple of years. But I don't know, really, really impressive that he's lived as long as he has, and that he's done all these, wonderful things. And say what you want to about Stan Lee and how he's, treated his fellow creators in the early days and all of that stuff. I've always thought there's a lot to admire about the guy. And anyway, the other thing I wanted to talk about, like I said, is Stan Lee's idea that a Star Wars Avengers crossover is possible, maybe even likely. It seems like anytime anybody who's remotely in the know, and especially somebody as with the kind of clout and knowledge of the inner workings of Marvel and the movies and stuff as Stan Lee has got to have. The internet has a tendency to immediately freak out and assume things are happening, and the articles I read yesterday, of course, were not jumping the gun and saying there's definitely going to be a Star Wars Avengers crossover. They were reporting it as it seemed like it really was, which is Stan Lee making some conjecture that such a thing might be possible. But of course, the internet blew up, and oh man, Star Wars Avengers crossover probably going to happen. Just because Stan Lee says a thing certainly doesn't mean that it's absolutely going to. But I do think that it's fair to say that he's not wrong about it. I think that it is a very possible thing with Disney owning both of those things, and as nuts as that sounds, and as much as I have no idea what kind of situation you could possibly come up with that would seem plausible, where you could, in the films, put those things together like an epic comic book mashup, where it would be plausible and anybody would remotely buy into it. Money talks, and that is a thing that would make insane amounts of money. I really liked a lot of what Stan Lee said about it. He was like, I don't know how many characters you can put in a movie, and that's a really good point, because with both the Star Wars and the Avengers movies, you've always got a lot of in Marvel movies, you've always got a lot of characters, but with Avengers, we keep adding people, and now Civil War is going to be the majority of the universe, and then when we get into Infinity War, it's gonna really be a lot of characters, and so man, just all these war names. It's like, well, at least they got that in common. Star Wars and Marvel have a lot of wars, and use that word in things a lot. So I liked it. I liked that he said, that would be a whole lot of characters. I don't really know what you would do with it. But he said that anytime the public really demands something, Hollywood tends to find a way to make it happen, because, it's going to make a lot of money. Batman vs. Superman was something people wanted to see forever, and it was something that I think almost kind of happened a couple of times, and it's no surprise that Warner Brothers really sunk their teeth into that idea when Snyder and Goyer and everybody, and I realize that Goyer's not involved now, but I think that idea was, I think that he was involved in that idea in the first place, maybe. And anyway, so but it's no surprise that Warner's jumped at that when they came to him with that and said, hey, let's go ahead and bring Batman in now and have these guys fight, because it's a big, historical precedent that hasn't been set yet, that we haven't ever seen Superman and Batman on the big screen together. And with Marvel, there was, of course, a big novelty with the Avengers to get to see all these disparate characters in their own movies. And even though we knew that it was supposed to be the same universe, to get to see them all interact together was a big historical thing, historical milestone that we'd never seen before. And for something like that to happen with a couple of big franchises this big, we have crossover franchises before. Obviously, you got Alien and Predator, and you've got Freddy and Jason, but nothing to this extreme, where you've got these two huge powerhouses that break all the records, and then we go, yeah, let's break them again by throwing them all together. I keep saying that nothing surprises me anymore. Nothing surprises me anymore. Now, I would obviously be really stoked to see what exactly was going to happen with it, and it would be very exciting. But I'm in a place now where if Warner's, and this doesn't sound possible, man, if Warner's and Disney got together tomorrow and said, we know we would make $1 bazillion, like Star Wars, Force Awakens, setting a bar, probably, has it already made $2 billion? Is it gonna make, it's gonna do at least $2 billion, right? And they're like, we gotta beat that, movies never used to make that much money, how could we do it? Well, we'll join forces, and we'll put our DC characters and our Marvel characters together, and we'll have this giant epic mashup, and we'll do amalgam, but, better, on screen. I mean, like it would be really crazy, but I didn't know if Marvel and Sony could have put the kind of deal together that they put together. I'm just saying that, I guess I would sort of be surprised by it, but it doesn't feel as impossible as it used to, where nobody thought they would see Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny on screen together, and then it happened. And it just kind of feels like anything is possible these days. It's a really exciting time to live in. The mashups and crossovers are getting crazy. In video games, we're doing it constantly. It's getting nuts. You got Lego Dimensions, where we're seeing, it's in Lego form, but man, I never thought I would see Bart Simpson drive a Batmobile. All the really cool mashups in all these different places that we're getting to see. Who's to say that couldn't happen in the movies? Given, again, just the enormous amount of money that it would make. It wouldn't even matter if it was good. Everybody would go to that. Star Wars event, everybody would go to that. Now, what in the world would the story be? I guess the cool thing is, Marvel has such a history with Star Wars that it's not wholly against the tone of the Marvel brand. And one of the things that I keep praising Jason Aaron Star Wars for, and really the Star Wars wing right now at Marvel in general, is that it still feels like a Marvel comic. And the tone of it, and the tone of it is very authentically Star Wars, but the structure of it and the way it's presented is also really old school Marvel. And I don't know how exactly that would translate to screen. But, and obviously, when I say tone, I mean, Marvel has a lot of different sorts of superheroes and things that aren't even exactly superhero, and they run the gambit of all kinds of different sorts of genres, and they already have space fantasy there, kind of with Guardians, these days, and they already had that stuff with Silver Surfer and in Galactus and the cosmic side of Marvel, and we've got the cosmic side of Marvel with Thanos and stuff, and of course, that's all intertwined now with Guardians, but it's what they're doing with it is playing kind of fast and loose with science fiction, and feels kind of as science fantasy as it does science fiction, even though with the Asgard stuff and all of that, we're saying there's a science, but it feels a little like magic, and so there's these kind of blurred lines there. It's still, even though it is sort of technically science fiction, it still has a lot of those trappings of science fantasy and is about some of the same ideas. But how do you put So I'm just saying that, like, they've already kind of got that covered. A lot of people said Guardians was maybe sort of this generation Star Wars, and you know, and then this generation Star Wars is also Star Wars. But then, if you brought in Star Wars, I also don't know how redundant it would be, because Star Wars is so much its own unique thing, and there's nothing else like it. Certainly, we don't have anything in the Marvel movies right now that is exactly an homage in a retread like that of you know, space adventure serials, and so there's that. But as far as like story wise, you know, how would you put those things together? I can't imagine that the Marvel Universe is a place where Star Wars does not exist as a fiction, and I don't remember any specific instances right off the top of my head right now. If you guys remember any, leave them in the comments, where anybody evokes Star Wars. But I would be really surprised if it hasn't happened somewhere in all of this continuity we have between TV shows and in Netflix shows and films. It's a world that more or less looks like ours, and the only thing that you know, I mean, we've had pop culture references all over it, and Wizard of Oz and, you know, things like that, and so the only thing that doesn't seem to exist as a fiction, of course, is the Marvel Universe, because we're in the Marvel Universe, and so it seems like you'd have to do some sort of meta thing where you bring in the fiction and create it as reality. That's the only thing I could see, unless you do the Grant Morrison thing of comic books are sometimes a window into other universes, and what we thought was a fiction actually does exist somewhere else. I would assume interdimensional crossover if you were to do it at all. But what do you folks think? Does this sound like something that is really absurd and Stan Lee's wrong, and it's not going to happen just because these two things are so much their own worlds that it would be just too preposterous to try it? Since the same studio owns them both, I just don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility. And even studios that don't own things, we've got a lot of precedent set now for people coming together and making things happen just because of how popular we know they would be and how much money they would generate. I could see it. I don't know if it's something I necessarily want. I would be really fascinated by it. Certainly, it's not a thing. I'm not one of those people that needs everything to cross over with everything else, where I'm like chomping at the bit, going, "Oh my God, I've got to have that. That would be great." They don't seem like they would immediately go together. In video game form, it is really fun to take Captain America and give him a lightsaber, but I don't know that I have to see that. But then I'm thinking about this, and like character parallels would be really interesting. You know, like Captain America would. You know, Captain America and Thor, I would see as maybe almost immediately being Force users if it were to work that way. Like, if you put the universes together, is a person a Force user because if they were born in that world, they would be, or, but then I guess the Force isn't a thing that you have because you're worthy of it, like a hammer. But I certainly would see Captain America kind of immediately getting the you know, what Yoda is selling about the light side and stuff. I don't know, like I gotta think about that, and then like and then at the same time, you know, looking at the dark side and what Thanos and characters like that would do, you know, the really dark evil characters in the Marvel Universe, what they would do if confronted with the dark side of the Force and the Sith, and again, if somehow or rather they you know, were you had some scary people that were latent Force users that just didn't use the Force because this world doesn't have the Force. But anyway, I don't know. It's certainly something that sparks the imagination. Anyway, everybody, thanks as always for watching, and looking forward to seeing your comments. This concludes today's Captain's Log.